Okay, so we'll make a start and begin by setting our motivation, thinking we need the correct motivation to receive the Mahayana mind training teachings, the Lojong teachings. And yeah, so because it's a Mahayana Dharma, we need the Mahayana motivation, motivation of great compassion, thinking we'll listen to the teachings and put them into practice, not just for our own benefit, but benefit all sentient beings. And with that in mind, visualize great Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front, and surrounding him are the masters of India and Tibet. You can do the traditional visualization where stacked above Shakyamuni Buddha are the lineage gurus from the various tantric practices you have or any kind of practice like that. So it can be particularly beneficial to visualize or think of the Lojong lineage masters above him. And then to his Shakyamuni Buddha's right, we have the masters of the lineage of method, so Maitreya and Asanga and so forth. Then to his left, we have the masters of the lineage of wisdom, so Manjushri and Nagarjuna, Shantideva, and so forth. And then below are the Yidams, Dharma protectors, Dakinas, and so on. And think surrounding ourselves, all sentient beings, being our mother and father since beginning this time. And because of that, we're going to show them great compassion and lead them in the prayer. Begin with the praise of Shakyamuni Buddha. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, Jiva Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, Jiva Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfect complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha over the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. In the mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha, Tayatha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Mahamuni Yesoha. Tayatha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Mahamuna Yesoha. Tayatha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Mahamuna Yesoha. Then we won't recite the entire Heart Sutra, but we'll just recite the praise. The inexpressible, inconceivable, and indescribable perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of 3 times I prostrate. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. Tayatha Om Gati Gati Paragati Parasamgati Bodhi Soha. And then we'll offer short mandala, offer it to the Buddha to request teachings from him. Oh, sa shi bo ki yo shi me to tra li li ni re yen body Sangye Shiru Mikse Uwai Dokunda Dojinla Chopa Sho. Jesu lama dampa nam gi choku kala Hien se ju zin tri ji ta sang pe tu le zin ma la ya gi chu ki sha pa pa tu so Irangu Anamantala Kamni Atayami. And then Mine of Refuge in Bodhicitta. Sangye Chora Soni Chonamna. Chanjo Badu Dani Kapsuchi. Dagi Jinso Gipe Sonangi. Drola Penchi Sangye Rupa Sho Sangye Chora Soni Chonamna. Chanjo Badu Dani Kapsuchi. Dagi Jinso Gipe Sonangi. Drola Penchi Sangye Rupa Sho Sangye Chora Soni Chonamna. Chancho Padu Tani Kapsuchi Taki Jinso Gipe Sonangi Trola Pinshi Sange Rupa Sho. So today we'll do the 7-point thought transformation, or the 7 points of mind training by Geshe Chekhawa. So in mind training or lojong, and there are two classes of mind training. There's the more general mind training, which Lama Zopa Rinpoche emphasized that all Dharma is lojong, all Dharma is mind training, because its purpose is to train our mind and progress along the path. But then beyond that, we have the Mahayana lojong, this Tekshin lojong, and this is the mind training in accordance with the Mahayana, specifically sort of these texts from the Kadampa masters where they talk about generating bodhicitta and so on. So this text is very concise, but very profound, deep in its meaning. And it covers a range of topics. It's a bit more elaborate than other Lojong texts in that it doesn't just cover the generation of bodhicitta and sort of practices of patience and so on. So for this, we'll look at the root text, and in some places the commentary by Gyalse Tokme Zangpo. Zangpo, who was, a great early master. So he was a Gadampa master, and he was sort of renowned for these teachings on bodhicitta and the kind of Lojong in particular. Particularly his root text, or his most common text, is the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva, which is an incredibly profound and detailed text. So, the root text is available on Lossawa House, and there are two versions. So I'm using the version from the Damdak Zo, the treasury of Pith Instructions, one of Jaron Control's texts, where he compiled a great collection of Kadampa texts. So this version has some slight annotations. There's quite a few ways of doing it, but it's not very clear on where these annotations come from. I don't think they're in the root text. So these annotations have been taken from Gyalse Tokme Zangpo's commentary. So a nice way of elaborating on this. So the root text begins with the preliminaries. So it says on Svasti, first train in the preliminaries, and that's all the root text says. So Gyalse Tokme Zangpo explains the preliminaries refer to sort of in as we see in the Lam texts, before meditating on bodhicitta, you need to develop renunciation for samsara ourselves. And to do this, we have to meditate on the precious human rebirth, how rare it is to have this precious human rebirth, the advantages of having it, how we need to make it useful. Then meditate on death and impermanence. And finally, the suffering of samsara. So to do this, they're the key. And they say if you don't have, without renunciation, you'll never generate bodhicitta. And the Buddha explained in the sutra that just as the lion's the king of the jungle, but just as the elephant's the greatest of the beasts, the meditation on it, death and impermanence is foremost. So the Buddha explained in the sutras, the importance of meditating on death and impermanence. And this is quite clear, without this we can't generate renunciation. So in this way we begin the preliminaries by meditating on these. But we won't go into too much detail because we'll cover this in other classes and think you're quite aware on this. So if we just quickly look at the outlines, so Gyalse Tokme Zangpo created a very nice outline to cover these 7 points. So he explains the first is the preliminaries, the second is the main practice of training in bodhicitta, the third is how to bring adversity into the path, the fourth is how to apply the teachings throughout our entire lives, the fifth is the measure of mind training, so to see your progress, the sixth is the commitments of mind training, the seventh is the precepts of mind training. And we'll come on to those later and look at the difference between these kind of commitments and precepts. So then the second, the main practice. So Gyalse Tokme Zangpo, it contains 2 parts. Is the preparation, the main practice consists of 2 parts, ultimate and relative bodhicitta. And then of each, the 2 bodhicittas is the main and the preparation and the conclusion. But the root text is just the main part and conclusion. So it doesn't have these divisions. So the root text says, consider all dharmas as dreamlike. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. Let even the antidote be freed in its own place. Rest in the alaya, the essence of the path. Between sessions, be a conjurer of illusions. So this one's a bit more complicated. This is starting off with the ultimate bodhicitta and the right view of emptiness. So it's generally said Gyalse Tokme Zangpo held the view of the mind-only school. But most of his works are nowadays explained from the point of view of the Prasangika. It doesn't particularly matter which of the 2 you hold. Well, depending on the tradition you follow, if you're only practicing sutra, it does matter. According to sutra, or at least if you are an upholder of the Prasangika school, according to sutra, if you don't have the Prasangika view, you cannot become enlightened. But if you practice the Vajrayana, it explains that even if you begin with the view of the mind only, during the practice you'll have the realization of the Prasangika school. So in this way, as Vajrayana practitioners, it doesn't particularly matter at the start, and eventually you go on to Prasangika. So it says, consider all dharmas as dreamlike. So saying consider all phenomena as dreamlike, lacking true existence. There's nothing to be found. Just like in a dream, it's a mental conjuring. All phenomena are this kind of mental creation. And it's, cutting off the mental projections, these mental conceptions where you have conceptualizations and elaborations on points. Examine the nature of unborn awareness. So the mind itself, as we know, is impermanent. It arises, abides, and ceases. It doesn't have color, shape, any kind of external form. It's not something that can be found inside or outside the body. It's not something we can apprehend. And we're saying just examine this nature. Can you find the mind? You can't find the mind. Is it a physical object? Is it outside the body? Can you find it? And then you think there's nothing to be found. You rest in this experience, thinking that the body and mind are empty. There's no inherent existence. Or, in Gyalse Tokme Zangpo's opinion, there's this view of being distant and cut off, the subject and object being different substance. And says, let even the antidote be freed in its own place. So that's then taking it a step further. The antidote being emptiness, the antidote to all of our suffering and samsara is the right view of emptiness. So we then examine emptiness and see if that exists from its own side, and we examine how emptiness is empty of inherent existence. And then rest in the alaya, the essence of the path. So this is about avoiding the projections and conceptions associated with the other 7 types of consciousness. And we're just resting in this state. And then it says, between sessions be a conjurer of illusions. So that's how we meditate on emptiness. In this state, we just abide in this mind free of concepts, seeing how things lack inherent existence. So here, Gyalse Tokme Zangpo is essentially explaining a very similar meditation to Mahamudra or Dzogchen, free from conceptualization. You're not placing any kind of analytical thought to this. Then he says, between sessions be a conjurer of illusions. So then when we go into our post-meditation session, we continue out in the world. Everything we experience is like an illusion. We keep this awareness. We're not saying that there's nothing existing at all, but we're just being aware that it doesn't exist how it appears. It doesn't exist from its own side. So they might appear that way to us because we're not a Buddha. Until we are a fully enlightened being, things appear to exist inherently. They appear distant and cut off. But the important part of this post-meditation is remembering as it appears to exist inherently. We recall the meditation and go, oh yeah, that's not how things exist. So from there, we move on to relative bodhicitta. So the root text says, train in the two, giving and taking alternately. These two are to be mounted on the breath. So, this is in very brief explaining, we need to practice Tonglen. If you read the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, let's check which verse. Yeah, chapter 3, verse 120 and 131. Sorry, chapter 8, verse 120, 131, and 136. Shantideva says, whoever wishes to afford protection quickly to both himself and others should practice the most sacred mystery, the exchanging of oneself for others. Unless I can give away my happiness in exchange for others' suffering, I shall not attain the awakening I seek. Even in samsara, I'll find no joy. In order to allay harms done to me, therefore, in order to pacify the suffering of others, I shall give myself up to others and cherish them as I do myself. So to meditate on Tonglen, we need to start with equanimity. And the most common way to do this is to meditate on how all sentient beings want happiness and want to avoid suffering. And in this way, they're all even. Then thinking about how all sentient beings have been our mother and shown us great kindness. Or at least if you have a difficult relationship with your mother, they've been someone who's cared for you and shown you great kindness. Then we take it a step further and we recall the kindness and think all these infinite sentient beings who have been my mother since the beginning of its lifetimes have shown me this equivalent, this kindness. They've raised us and cared for us, and they've allowed us to meet the Dharma and have these conditions to practice. So they've shown us great kindness, which we must repay. Or there's been a few comments I've read lately where it explains that maybe repaying isn't a very suitable word, because that's kind of transactional, and you think it's about seeing how they've shown us great kindness and wanting to do the same back. Wanting to be just as caring as they've been to us. And then we think, okay, so to do this, all sentient beings want happiness and its cause and to be free from suffering and its causes. So I'll make sure they're free of suffering. And then, on the breath, we take in all their negative karma and all these causes of suffering in form of black smoke. And this meet with all of our negative karma and they just dissolve into the expanse of space, into this, seeing how they are empty of an empty existence. There's no negative karma to be found ultimately. It just dissolves into emptiness. And then think we give away all of our positive potentials, all of our virtues we've accumulated since being in this lifetime. We do that on the out breath with light radiating from our nose, basically. And it fills the extent of space, giving all these mother sentient beings happiness and its causes. And then that refers to the meditation. And then the next, continuing in the text, root text, it says 3 objects, 3 poisons, and 3 sources of virtue. In all activities trained by applying slogans, begin the process of taking with yourself. So here we start off with 3 objects, the 3 poisons, and 3 sources of virtue. So on the basis of the 3 types of objects, whether it's a pleasant object, an unpleasant object, or a neutral object, we experience the 3 poisons of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. And then, based on that, we have apply the opposite. As if we consider that all sentient beings want this happiness and we think about this, we then, when we see a pleasant object, an unpleasant object, or a neutral object, we don't act under the control of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. All this dull indifference, as the text from Tokme Zangpo says. We are applying non-attachment, non-aversion, and this non-indifference. So we're not overly attached to sentient beings and focusing on them, but we're also not having aversion to things we dislike and so on. And then it says, in all activities trained by applying slogans. So this refers to the Kadampa practice of reciting the Lojong slogans or reciting verses such as, may all negative karma and suffering ripen upon me, and may all happiness and positive karma ripen on others. So we're constantly reminding ourselves that we should be thinking this way. And then it says, begin the process of taking with yourself. So thinking that we can't help sentient beings while we are suffering so much. And, if there's such intense suffering, we can't benefit beings, that's no good. So we need to start with tonglen for ourselves. Taking our future suffering from all our negative karma we've accumulated at the beginning of this lifetimes and dissolving that into emptiness and giving all this virtue accumulated through the 3 times to ourselves. And then we expand to sentient beings. So that's the second outline. And the third is transforming adversity into the path. So here in the root text it says, when all the world is filled with evil, transform adversity into the path of enlightenment. Drive all blames into one, meditate on the great kindness of all, meditating on the illusory perceptions of the 4 kayas as the unsurpassable sunyata protection. Whatever you encounter, apply the practice. So the first, we say, due to negative karma, unwholesome karma of the past, the universe and the outer container of the universe and the sentient beings within suffer. So the outer container of this universe we live in the resources become depleted, things become unruly, there's more war, there's more sickness, and so on. So to counteract this, we have to generate virtue. But also we need to just take this onto the path because this is what we experience right now. So then in the past, we haven't seen the self-grasping as the cause of our own suffering. So we don't see that this is the enemy of our own happiness and enlightenment. So rather than thinking about when we've done things wrong, we always just blame other sentient beings. So then we drive all blame onto ourselves. So we think whatever suffering we're experiencing right now is a result of our previous negativities. So how can we blame other sentient beings for that when it's our own karma ripening on ourselves? So again in the Bodhisattva Charivatara, in chapter 8, in verse 134, it says, "If all the harm within the world and all the fears and sufferings derive only from clinging to a self, what need I hide for such a demon?" So because of all our negative karma comes from this ignorance and grasping at a truly existent self and cherishing this self more than we cherish others, we have to do the opposite now. And that involves meditating on emptiness. But first, we sort of meditate on the great kindness of all. Because to meditate and become a Buddha, we need to generate this right motivation. So we meditate on the great kindness of all to develop our bodhicitta, to develop this great compassion. Because great compassion is the antidote to self-grasping. If we cherish others more than ourselves, we train in this way, our self-grasping reduces and our own suffering reduces. That's why His Holiness Dalai Lama says, if you want to be selfish, at least be wise about it. So he's saying you can practice for your own benefit and be selfish in this way, but do it in a wise way. So we know working for the benefit of others brings our own happiness. Therefore, we want to happiness ourselves, but we need to work for the benefit of other sentient beings. So we might have a bit of a selfish motivation of our own happiness, but we're still not harming other sentient beings, which is normally what happens when we're motivated by selfishness. So then we go on to the ultimate bodhicitta. So the relative is the Tonglen practice, and this meditating on compassion as an antidote to self-grasping. But then we can also apply the ultimate bodhicitta, the meditation on emptiness as an antidote to self-grasping. So saying meditating on delusory or illusory perceptions as the four kayas is the unsurpassable sunyata or emptiness protection. So we think that the afflictions and the suffering that we experience caused by the universe, the outer container, or the sentient beings within it, these are just illusory perceptions of our mind. They don't exist truly from their own side. They're like a dream, if you get you have a nightmare where you maybe get attacked and beaten and so on. It's you generate great fear and terror at this thought, but it doesn't really happen. There's no, you're not being beaten and hurt. It's just a dream. So in the same way, phenomena like true reality is like a dream. There's no real ultimate suffering to be found. So then it says about thinking of them as the four kayas. So we say, since phenomena lack true reality, we look in the mental afflictions and suffering. They arise from nowhere in the beginning. But if it's the unborn Dharmakaya, they do not arise from anything. They do not inherently and truly arise from something. Then what is not arisen cannot cease. So it's the unceasing Sambhogakaya. And then if it neither abides nor ceases, if it doesn't arise or cease, it cannot abide, it cannot remain. So that's the non-abiding Nirmanakaya. And since these three are indivisible in essence, that's the Svabhavika Vikaya, the fourth kaya, the the ultimate kaya, or the essence, or the essence body, Svava kaya. The so that's the seeing how all illusory perceptions are the four kayas in this way. They are the Dharmakaya, the non-abiding, the unborn Dharmakaya, the unceasing Sambhogakaya, the non-abiding Nirmanakaya. And then the union of the three, there's no arising, abiding, and ceasing. Meditating on them in this way as absence of truly existence protects our mind because we see the afflictions just don't exist at all. There's no real affliction to cause us suffering. So then, yeah, so this proves to us basically saying that then we can take this suffering into the path by seeing how all that causes us to suffer, these what we think normally as negative things, are actually positive things because they're allowing us to practice the Dharma and allowing us to please the Guru in this way. And then the root text follows on by whatever you encounter, apply this practice. So he's just saying, whatever we experience in samsara, we should apply this meditation on the two bodhicittas non-stop. Then the fourth point, applying practice throughout the whole life. It says the Mahayana advice of transference involves the same five strengths. Conduct is important. Sorry. The essence of the instruction, briefly stated, is to apply yourself to the five strengths. The Mahayana advice of transference involves the same five strengths. Conduct is important. So, the fourfold, yeah. So there's a line here in the root text of one version that's slightly different. Maybe missed a line. Yeah. Sorry, in the previous section still, the section 3, there's a line here that's rather unclear. Gyalse Tokme Zangpo's annotations were midway in the line. So it actually says on section 3, when all the world is filled with evil, transform adversity into the path of enlightenment. Drive all blames into one, meditating on the great kindness of all. Meditating on delusory perceptions of the four kayas is the unsurpassable sunyata protection. The fourfold practice is the best of methods. Whatever you encounter, apply the practice. So the fourfold practice is accumulating merit, kind of practicing the six perfections in this way, making offerings to the three jewels, making, whether we do it physically, verbally, or mentally, taking refuge, bodhicitta, offering mandalas, and so on. Then the second is practicing the purification of negative deeds. So we think having these four factors, first with the power of regret, thinking about how all these negative deeds we've done is causing us to suffer. And then we have the power of restraint, thinking we're not going to repeat them again. Then you have the power of, support and the antidote where we actually do the purification practice, whether it's Vajrasattva or the 35 Confessions Buddha and so on, and resolve thinking we're not going to do these again. Then the third is the practice of offering to harmful influences. So it's saying offering tamas and making heartfelt prayers, thinking, since you support my training in bodhicitta, you're very kind. Please continue. Cause all the suffering of sentient beings to ripen on me. But then Gyalse Tokme Zangpo explains, if we're not in a position to be able to practice like this right now, we should offer tamas, cultivate loving kindness and compassion, and command these spirits, thinking, through whatever I do to assist you now and in the long term, do not obstruct my Dharma practice. Because as beginners, we're not necessarily able to take all these adversities onto the path. Most of us, if you look at like the lineage gurus, especially more recent ones fleeing Tibet, and or like Gajah Rinpoche being tortured in prison and so on, we can't take these onto the path of where we are right now. So we don't want all this we can't pray for this to happen because it's not going to help us and it's probably going to cause more problems in the long term. So for ordinary beings like us, we just need to think, well, assist me, don't cause too many problems, and we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. And then the fourth is offering to the Dharma protectors. Offering tormas to the Dharma protectors, asking them to pacify circumstances that hinder Dharma practice. So it says, whatever you encounter, apply to the practice. So as well as in daily life, practicing these four, whenever we can, we should practice these four practices. We should also meditate on emptiness and bodhicitta at all times. Yes, so that's how we take them on. And then we think that's taking the adversities onto the path. And now we want to apply the practice throughout our entire lives. So the essence of the instructions briefly stated is to apply yourself to the five strengths. Mahayana advice for transference involves the same five strengths. Conduct is important. So the five strengths themselves are very key. So these are the strength of impetus, or the strength of thinking about from this moment on, from now on, this month, this year, throughout my life, until I attain enlightenment, I shall never be parted from the two bodhicittas. Then the strength of familiarization is training repeatedly in the two bodhicittas. The strength of wholesome seeds is to accumulate merit as much as possible, because if we don't have the merit, we cannot meditate on and generate these two bodhicittas in our mind stream. Then the strength of revulsion is to reflect and observe our mind, and when self-cherishing occurs, think and recognize how it's the cause of all our suffering and how we want to just cast it aside completely. Then the strength of aspiration. This is to think from this point on till I attain enlightenment in every path from the training of the twofold bodhicittas, or may I transform any adversity into the path, and these kind of things. So the five strengths are to constitute a single practice that begins everything together into a single hum. So a complete syllable. The hung is a complete syllable in the same. And if we bring in these five, and it's a complete practice. So the Mahayana advice for transference involves the same five strengths. Conduct is important. So this is then thinking about practice at the time of our death. The first two lines talk about the practice throughout our lives. And then what do we do when we approach the time of death? So, by this point, we want to apply these five strengths as well. The practice of the five seeds is to offer all of our merit accumulated to the guru and the three jewels and so on, free from attachment. Then the strength of aspiration is to do the seven branch prayer and make aspiration prayers, thinking that in the bardo, may I be reborn in pure realm of Sukhavati so I can train in the two bodhicittas and become a Buddha to benefit beings, or grant me your blessings in the bardo, I attain enlightenment, or may in the bardo in all my future lives may I continue to train and develop in the two bodhicittas, and may I meet a guru who teaches this. And then the strength of revulsion is again thinking about how self-cherishing causes you to suffer. We cherish this body throughout our life, but it still suffers, it still ends, and we die. So there's nothing to grasp onto. This body is just a temporary kind of vehicle. And then the strength of impetus is to cultivate strong intention again and again of generating these true bodhicittas during the Vada in our future lives. And the strength of familiarization is to recall our previous meditations at the time of death. We should try and die with the mind of bodhicitta and emptiness. So then the particular conduct, this is explained where it says conduct is important. This is the particular conduct Shakyamuni Buddha taught of dying in the right posture, in the lying posture on our right side, the sort of right hand supporting our cheek, a little finger closing your nose like this. And then breathing through your left nostril, think you're taking in all this suffering and you're giving out all this happiness, practicing Tonglen. And then think about how, while you're doing this, all of samsara is just a mental projection. There's nothing to be found. And you do it without clinging, free from thinking the things existing only from your own side. And that is how you die, meditating on the two types of bodhicitta. So it's said that meditating on bodhicitta is a supreme power practice. So in this way, that's a supreme practice. Then the fifth, the measure of mind training. So all teachings share a single purpose. If the two witnesses rely upon the principal one, always maintain a joyful attitude. If this can be done even when distracted, you're proficient. So he's saying all the teachings of the Buddha, whether they belong to the Mahayana or the Shravakayana, the various vehicles, are all for the purpose of taming our mind. And then it says of the two witnesses rely upon the principal one. So it's saying about ourselves. The principal one is our own judgment of our own mind. You don't rely on what others think about you and they go, oh, you've practiced really well because you look serene. Because you might know your own mind isn't serene as you appear. You're full of afflictions. So you have to be honest with yourself and be a bit critical. And then always maintain a joyful attitude. Think we've trained our mind, we're doing well, we should be rejoice in this. And then also we can be happy because we can take whatever circumstances we experience onto the path. And when you can do that, that's how you know you've trained sufficiently well in Lojong, in your mind training. Even when distracted. So it's explained as the horse rider. A skilled horse rider can have a conversation, do other things while riding their horse and not fall off. So in the same way, someone skilled in Lojong can experience suffering and not suffer. No, they can experience the ripening of negative karma and not suffer and still keep bodhicitta in mind. Whereas a beginner like myself and others, if we were to ride a horse and be distracted and maybe try and, if you think of a Mongolian horse rider, or I think it's done in Bhutan as well, and it was done in Tibet. In Tibet, it was with a sling more, but in Bhutan, in, say, Mongolia, they use bow and arrow on the horseback. So a skilled horse rider can fire a bow and arrow and not fall off the horse, whereas an unskilled rider will fall off while trying to get the arrows out and so on. So in the same way, someone who's not skilled in mind training, when we experience negativities, it causes us to suffer and be unhappy. So that's how we know we've succeeded in mind training. So then the sixth is the commitments of mind training. So it says, train consistently in three basic principles. So not to transgress these three, and not to transgress the mind training commitments, not to be reckless, and not to fall into partiality. So thinking, the first one's not transgressing the commitments, thinking we can ignore our precepts. We should regard our vows very carefully. All the three sets of vows, whichever vows we hold, we need to hold them very carefully at the cost of our life. and avoiding reckless behavior. So it's talking about being careful. And so it's saying, even though you have no self-cherishing, not showing off about that. So avoid the example here is chopping down powerful trees or befriending lepers. Taking quite serious risks to our life because we don't have attachment to this body. Think, you might not have attachment to this body and just recognize that it's a temporary hotel room, basically, and we'll just move on to the next life and continue practicing the Dharma. So you step out into traffic. But that's not beneficial because if you die too soon, you can't really benefit beings. Then it says, it's like, to avoid partiality. So it's avoiding loving friends but hating enemies. It also explains tolerating abuse from human beings but not from non-humans, or respecting the powerful and disrespecting the weak. So we might think we're training really well in mind training because whatever a person says to us, we can tolerate the abuse they throw at us. But then a mosquito buzzes around our ear and we can't, we're meditating and we get angry and we slap it like this. In that case, you're not really practicing mind training well because you need to be applied to all sentient beings. So then the actual commitments are to change your attitude but remain neutral. Don't speak of injured limbs. Don't ponder others' flaws. Train first with the strongest destructive emotions. Abandon any expectations of results. Give up poisonous food. Don't be so loyal to the cause. Don't lash out in retaliation. Don't lie in ambush. Don't strike a vulnerable point. Don't transfer the ox's burden to the cow or the zoe. Don't be competitive. Don't misperform the rites. Don't reduce gods to demons. And don't seek misery. So don't seek others' misery as crutches of your own happiness. So the first one is about changing our mind, from self-cherishing to cherishing others. But our actions are still linked in accordance with the Dharma. So we want to train our mind and not be too showing off outwardly about it. And then don't speak of injured limbs refers to avoiding saying unpleasant things about others. Pointing out any issues, saying about that. You can point out when someone's done something wrong to themselves, but it's about publicly deriding someone. Not so, especially in terms of discipline, it's about talking behind their back. Someone you might be close with, but they commit non-virtue, and you, rather than saying to them, "Look, I don't think you should do that because that's quite bad," you just gossip with other people, going, "Oh, so it's so awful because they're always doing this." That's not a good mind to have. And it's saying, don't ponder other flaws. Don't spend too long thinking about others' flaws. And then train first with the destructive emotions because the strongest destructive emotions are the most important we remove. And then getting rid of that, we can work on the subtler ones eventually. And then if we go away with, we have to abandon the expectation of results, selfish concern of things going right or having accomplishments and so on. So it says, give up poisonous food. And this refers to just how we abandon poisonous food. We should abandon thoughts of self-cherishing. Don't be so loyal to the cause. Is about abandoning resentment. Don't lash out in retaliation. It's quite clear. You don't want to speak when others criticize you and speak ill of you. We don't respond with harsh words. Don't lie in ambush. So don't, when someone harms us, don't keep a memory of that and then a week later, a few months later, you speak harshly or do something back to harm them intentionally. And don't strike a vulnerable point. So it's about just not causing others to suffer. And then don't transfer the ox's burden to the cow or the is taking on blame that is rightfully yours, but also being reasonable and not expecting too much of people. A cow can't carry the burden of the amount of food or something as an ox can. So some people aren't able to, they're not in a position to do things as well as other people can. Then don't be competitive because, thoughts and actions where we focus on acquiring through various means possessions of and trying to do things that way. It's possessions that are held in common, it says. Don't misperform the rites. So it's saying don't train in the Dharma because we want our own happiness, or don't do Tonglen. Don't take on others' defeat out of a wish for one's own ultimate happiness, or to train the mind to pacify demons. So basically, we're not using it for worldly reasons. We're going to become a Buddha. It's having this right motivation. Don't reduce gods to demons. So it's referring to not having puffed up pride, not having too much pride, and abandoning self-cherishing and being a humble servant. And don't seek others' misery as a crutch to our own happiness. It's of this avoiding wishing others to suffer. Thinking if some, people do take joy out of others' suffering, we should abandon this. And finally, the precepts of the mind training is to do everything with a single intention. So carrying everything out with bodhicitta. Counter all adversity with a single remedy. So practicing Tonglen to all our suffering. 2 tasks, one at the beginning, one at the end. That refers to practicing in the morning and generating bodhicitta, and thinking I'll do everything with this mind of bodhicitta, the twofold bodhicitta. And at the end of the day, you review your day's activities and rejoice in the good deeds and purify the negativities. Then whichever of the two occurs, be patient. So whatever we accumulate, followers, wealth, possessions, we should just be patient and not develop arrogance. But also, any suffering we experience, we shouldn't be discouraged. Keep the two even at your life's expense. So you keep the commitments of the Dharma in general, normal vows and the mind training commitments, even at the cost of your own life, basically. Training in the 3 difficulties. So when afflictions arise, it's difficult to notice them in the beginning, it's difficult to avert them in the middle, and difficult to interrupt their continuity at the end. So this is saying we should watch them arise and try and stop them, and try and prevent them from arising. If we, by applying the antidote, we avert them. But if we do see they arise again, or they arise, we should put a stop to them. Acquire the 3 main provisions. So meeting a teacher, practicing authentically, and gathering conditions conducive to Dharma practice. That's what we need. So we need a good teacher, and we need to listen, receive the teachings, and apply them. And we should try and have, if you're somewhere where it's difficult to practice the Dharma, it's very difficult to develop our mind further. Cultivate the 3 that must not decline. So since the qualities of Mahayana depend on guru devotion, this devotion should not decline. Then this mind training is the essence of the Mahayana Dharma. So enthusiasm for its practice shouldn't decline. And then our ethics, our keeping of any precepts and vows we hold, also should not decline. So keep the 3 inseparable, keep the body, speech, and mind inseparable from virtue. Apply the training impartially to all. It is vital that it be deep and all-pervasive. So we apply this to all sentient beings. We don't just think, I'll only take on the suffering of those who are nice to me. Meditate constantly on those who've been set apart. So those who we dislike and so on, we should really focus on them because that's the hardest part for us. And then don't be dependent on external conditions. So even when things externally aren't good, we should still practice on and meditate on the 2 bodhicittas. This time, practice what's most important. So it's just saying right now we need to meditate on the two bodhicittas. We've been in samsara since the beginning of this lifetime. We haven't meditated and gathered the two bodhicittas. We need to do that right now. Don't misunderstand. It's just don't misunderstand the Dharma and practice purely, basically. There's 6 mistaken forms of practice you can check and you should be opposite to them. Then don't be inconsistent. So it's like they say, a little every day is much more beneficial than a lot one day of the week and then nothing for 6 other days. So it's best to meditate and practice for 10 minutes every day than an hour for one day and then nothing for the rest of the week. Train wholeheartedly. So, when we practice, we should be single pointed and focused and just really devoted to the practice. Gain freedom through discernment and analysis. So this again is about looking at the afflictions, picking out which one's dominant, and focusing on removing that affliction. Don't be boastful, so be humble and don't praise yourself and think I'm an amazing practitioner because I practice highest yoga tantra or I practice Tonglen. None of that matters. That's self-cherishing. We should abandon that. Don't be irritable. So it's about not responding with harm when others harm us. Don't be temperamental. So don't change your expression because of the slightest provocation. We should be trying to work on this all the time. And the final one is don't seek acknowledgement. So don't expect praise or fame because of practicing the Dharma. That's the essence of mind training. If we practice in accordance with this vow, the commitments and precepts, because it's not really a vow we take, it's just like a commitment almost. I think the Tibetan for the first part's Damsig. It's almost like a samaya. This kind of, we should be keeping it. And if we keep it, we just progress along the path and develop two bodhicittas. And the conclusion, so the essence of the nectar-like instructions for transforming into the path of awakening, the 5 prevalent signs of degeneration was passed down from the Golden Isle. Was passed down from the one from Golden Isle. So this refers to Atisha going to Salimpa to see the great master Salimpa on Sumatra. I think that's where they've decided he lived, and receiving these Lojong teachings, and he brought them to India and Tibet. Then the root text finishes with when karmic seeds left over from former trainings were aroused in me, I felt great interest, and so without regard for suffering or discouragement, I sought instructions on subduing ego clinging. Now, even in death, I shall have no regrets. So we're saying that if we practice in this way when we die, we'll have no regrets and be completely happy. I think that's a good sign that we need to meditate on emptiness and meditate on Tonglen. And that's the essence of the Buddha Dharma. In fact, there's a sutra that I really like by the Buddha. It's called the Gold Sutra. It's 5 verses long, so I'll just read it quickly. It says, homage to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Just did I hear at one time, the Blessed One was dwelling in the Jetavana, in the park of Pindada. At the time, the Venerable Ananda asked the Blessed One, how should the mind of awakening be viewed? The Blessed One replied, Venerable Ananda, the mind of awakening should be viewed as being in nature like gold. Just as gold is pure by nature, so the mind of awakening is pure by nature. Just as a smith shapes gold into the multiplicity of forms, yet the nature of the gold does not change. Although the mind of awakening may appear to have a variety of unique attributes, ultimately these never waver from the mind of awakening, therefore its nature does not change. Then the Blessed One proclaimed the following verse. The mind of awakening is pure, strive for the benefit of self and others, meditate on the insubstantial essence, be intent on what causes the birth of wisdom. The Blessed One spoke thus, and Venerable Ananda, the entire retinue, and the world together with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised what the Bhagavan had said. So just there, we're seeing the Lojong teachings aren't something made up. by Solimpa or by Atisha or by the Tibetans, which is sometimes a criticism leveled at, but these come from the Buddha. So we meditate on the two bodhicittas constantly, and that'll bring us great happiness. So that concludes the 7-point mind training. So we'll stop there and we can take a minute for if you have any questions. Otherwise, we'll just dedicate.
Uh, so is there any way I can access any of this text? And am I allowed to read any of it on my own?
Yeah, the
Or
all the Lojong texts are completely open and unrestricted.
okay.
So
Um,
they're on Lotsawa House.
okay.
There's a very good translations on Lotsawa House. Um, there's also a book by Thubten Jinpa called it's a Lojong Gyatso. So it's the compendium. Yeah, it's a compendium of mind training. It's been published as, and it's about this thick, and it's a huge collection of Lojong texts. Very profound.
Okay. Could you please send me a link to what we went over today when you have time, please?
Yeah, I'll send a link, and I'll put a link in the description on the YouTube recording as well.
All right, sounds great. I would offer Donna right now if I wasn't in.
No, that's fine. There's no
Yeah.
need to offer Dana for these.
All right. Well, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Lama Pema Chopra, the an American Lama student of Lama Dao Rinpoche, explained that it's good to offer fine material offerings, but the ultimate offering is the practice of Dharma. So in this way, if you practice Lojong or meditate on two bodhicittas, that'd be incredible.
Yes, of course. All right. Thank you. Enjoy your dinner.
So we'll dedicate with the two bodhicittas. So Jamchub, Semchub, Rinpoche, Makhe, Panam, Kegyuchi, Gyepan, Yamba, Mepa, Yang, Gongye, Gongdu, Pelwa, Sho, Tony, Tawa, Rinpoche, Makhe, Panam, Kegyuchi, Gyepan, Yamba, Mepa, Gongne, Gongdu, Pelwa, Sho. Thank you very much. And